So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do a factorial analysis of variance in SPSS if it's all repeated measures. That is, all of your IVs, in this case it's a 2 by 2, but all your IVs are repeated measures, right? So again, I'll orient you to the SPSS guide for much more detailed information, but how you set up your data in your spreadsheet, you're going to have each person is tested in 4 different conditions, 4 different groups, so you're going to have their values listed in a row under the columns that represent each one of those groups. So once you've done that, that's the hard part. Then you're going to have your syntax. So your syntax looks very similar, but you're going to list all of your variables here on this line because that's what we're analyzing. Now the key here for factorial, and there's actually a separate sheet that sort of explains this in a little more detail, is this WS factors command. In this particular thing, we have 2 levels of study and 2 levels of test. And so it's a 2 by 2. And we tell SPSS that we have these variables. Now what SPSS does is it assumes that test is going to repeat, because it's listed to the right, it's listed last. SPSS assumes that test levels are going to repeat most often and that there's 2 levels. So that this would be one test, this would be a separate test, right? And in fact, the way I've named these variables is the second half of this variable name. That would be water test, this would be land test. Water test, land test. So indeed, test repeats most often with 2 levels. And SPSS, because we have study listed over here with 2, is going to assume that these 2 are common for study. And it's true. The first part of this variable, water, means that they studied underwater. Land means that these 2 variables studied on land. And so how you list this in SPSS is really key to getting the right kind of analysis, the grouping variables, because these are what we call nested. The variables are sort of nested in together. So it's not just listed haphazardly in here. It really matters. And this command matters as well. So for more details, you can see that handout, which explains that as well. It takes a little bit of practice. So again, to run your analysis, you just put your cursor over there and run it. And you're going to see the outputs very similar. You're going to get your means and standard deviations for all 4 of your groups. Ignore this. Here's your first variable of interest. It's study. So degrees of freedom would be 1, 17. Here's your F value. There's your P value, eta squared power. We're going to get a variable for test, degrees of freedom, F, P, and of course this is not significant. And then we're going to have our interaction. Degrees of freedom, F, P, partial eta squared power. So that's how you do a factorial analysis of variance in SPSS if it's all repeated measures.